some of the most consequential reading in the history of human civilization has been law. The rule of law is a quantum leap in how humanity populates the planet. From the Code of Hammurabi, from the Ten Commandments, from the Magna Carta, all the way through today, functioning free societies generally, and I got to couch my words very carefully here, generally observe the rule of law, which means that it's not up to the ruler to say what we're all supposed to do. It's written down somewhere. Because a single ruler sitting on a throne or behind a big desk, he can change his mind. He can decide what he wants to believe at any particular time and make everybody else go along with it. But if you write it down, the ruler is then kind of subject to that too. Because you can say, no, look, you say that I have to give you all of my money and come in on my day off and wash your car. But here, there's a specific provision in the rules of our society, the laws of our society, that says no citizen should be made to wash the car of the grand exalted ruler on his day off. Right there. So the ruler is stymied. Darn it! My car is dirty. What am I supposed to do? That is the protection of the rule of law against unassailable power. We have words on our side, and the ability to read those words empowers us as human beings. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution generally of the United States is founded on that basic idea. Protecting against what was a big fear at the time, a federal government that would become too much like the English king and not responsive to the authority invested in the people themselves. But in the reading of these things, problems arise. Should we be able to change these? Should we be able to, all right, this rule doesn't really work for us anymore. Why don't we get rid of it? Or why don't we just tweak that one? Because, this was written 250 years ago or whatever. Can you do that? What happens to the rule of law if you come along and start screwing around with the words on the page? Suddenly, well, you can change anything. Or maybe I know what I want to change, but that guy over there, he seems to want to change something different. And what I want to change, well, that change would benefit me. But what that guy wants to change, that's going to kind of screw me over. So how do you do that? Strict construction and loose construction, we learn about that in high school. Originalism. Prevailing, largely, theory of conservative legal scholars today, that you have to stick to the specific definitions written or specific definitions of the language as it was written at the time it was written. These are very narrow confines in what you can interpret. But just look at a couple of these amendments. First Amendment, everybody always feels good about that because it's about freedom. We can say whatever we want. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridgment of the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Put that right up front. Number one, people have power, inalienable rights in another locution. The ability to speak their minds, to get together and speak as a group, to get together and worship as a group, free from persecution. Well, okay. But this has been parsed many, many times. This has been interpreted many, many times. Are there limits to this? You can feel good about it, but, you know, there's the cliche argument, well, are you free to go in and shout fire in a crowded theater and watch everybody stampede out and kill one another? That's freedom of expression. I want to see what would happen if I yelled fire in this crowded theater. And wow, that was wild when it happened. Or are you allowed to go and insult people in the press? Freedom of the press. Can I start a newspaper where I say that all short people should die?
No, thank you.
What about the song? Here's a deep cut for some of you. There was an actual song called Short People Got No Reason to Live by a beloved American songwriter. I'll leave it to you guys to Google.
Who is this person? And where
Should he be prosecuted for cruelty, for inciting violence against short people?
Depends on if violence of short people actually happened from it.
Was he joking?
Maybe he was.
He was, I gotta tell you. But, again, that is expecting the reader to assume that he is joking. If the reader is incapable of detecting humor, I know a lot of people with that problem, if the reader can't tell that he was joking, he might say, oh, yeah, short people should all be killed. That makes sense. I'm gonna go buy my gun now.
I'm glad I'm going to the shooting range for my birthday then.
Yes.
We're a little bit of fun.
Speaking of which,
I'm not kidding.
Amendment 2, right to bear arms. Gee, this one comes under an awful lot of scrutiny these days. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is critical reading. People are parsing this very, very narrowly. Why is it that they begin with the well-regulated militia? That's what theoretically they were concerned with at the time. Militias are really no longer an issue for the federal government. Militias there are crackpots out there who start little survivalist groups who like to go live in the woods and, I don't know, be cold together and do that. And sure, that is fine. They are allowed to go do that. It's, you know, it's reasonably harmless until they actually come out of the hills. But this was before there was a standing army in the United States, so militias were kind of the only thing that we had. So this amendment is addressing that. And then the rest of it is, well, okay. A militia is basically just a posse, a gathering of citizens who have to provide their own weapons. So, of course, they need to be able to get weapons. So in order to have that, in order to have a militia, you have to have the citizens with the weapons. So if one is the other. But if you get rid of the militia, does that mean that the citizenry should still have access to these weapons? I don't know. Many people celebrating the Second Amendment, defending the Second Amendment, will sort of glide past that first clause. You know, they'll print the rest of it. the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They'll print that on T-shirts, and they will celebrate those words like crazy. But what does that initial clause do
Gives context.
to the second? It gives some context. And context means reading, interpreting, with, text. How do you understand the text? What assumptions do you bring to the reading of the text? What biases? What interpretive tools? What whims and prejudices do you bring to the experience of interpretation, of reading? But even if you grant that, okay, Second Amendment is what it is, still, if it's in the Constitution, all of those, you can't touch the Bill of Rights because all of them are equally valid. What is Amendment number 3? No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. This just doesn't happen anymore. It was commonplace at the time, but again, this is before the U.S. had a standing army. Now they're pretty well set up, you know? Not that the U.S. Army does an awful lot of fighting on U.S. soil for the last 150 years or so, but even if they did, they got pretty good digs not too far away. But if you get rid of one and say that, well, it's outdated, that opens up the question, well, what else might be outdated? And you get into the whole muskets versus AR-15s argument over the Second Amendment. These readings, the ability to say, hey, words matter, are extraordinarily consequential. Jump forward to number 10. Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to it by the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's the Civil War. That is state supremacy versus federal supremacy. Who is ultimately more powerful within the borders of any one state? That is 665,000 Americans dead in the fields of the U.S. Civil War. And how many other people have lost their lives or their dignity in exactly this conflict? Can the federal government make rules for all the individual states? Can the states, being closer to the people of that region, push back against rules for the federal government? These questions are unresolvable, but the ability to attend to them skillfully matter. The ability to read the text and go back and not just go blathering on about what you see on, like, you know, internet crap, but actually go and read the amendments and read the Constitution and read the laws in a rule of law society so that you are empowered. This is honestly one of the core reasons that education exists, that schools exist, to take you guys, God help us, and whip you into productive and critical thinkers. The ability to contribute to society in a meaningful and thoughtful way, instead of just knee-jerk sentiments and emotional outbursts. This is what reading is. This is the rule of law.